Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships and healing from them. So we're going to talk about why being in a narcissistic relationship feels like you are always living in disaster planning mode. Let's break that down. If you have ever been in a narcissistic relationship, you completely know what I'm talking about, right? You're just always on edge. Now let's go back. I mean, this is a universal experience we all had. The pandemic taught us this. Certainly in the early days of the pandemic, remember all those limits on bleach wipes and toilet paper? We saw people turn their houses into storage bunkers that were meant to withstand the days ahead, and I had no idea people would need that many boxes of mac and cheese to withstand the apocalypse. But this isn't only about the pandemic. This has always been a thing. As I was thinking about this video, I remember as a kid in the 1970s, I remember a few times, you were playing with friends and going into the basements and storage sheds and closets of friends while we'd be playing a game of hide and seek or something. And I remember seeing them having shelves and shelves of canned and boxed foods and paper products. And I even remember going home, because my mother didn't do that, and saying, "Mom, we only have like old boxes and like broken appliances and a workbench in our basement. Are we going to starve?" And she looked at me a little oddly and said, and I'm going to translate this because she wasn't speaking English. She said, "I don't know what they're worried about, and we're going to be fine." It was the Cold War era, so maybe people thought like boxes of Jell-O in their basement were going to be enough to withstand that whole issue. So I live in California, earthquake central, and every year we're instructed to have earthquake kits, right? To carry us for a few days and keep them in the house and in the car. And I get it. If all hell broke loose, water and some food and medication would make all the difference in the world, right? We prepare for disasters. And then once we're prepared, we hope that they will never happen. And I would imagine that some people who prepare for disasters in a more comprehensive way, like having half of a Costco in their basement or in their garage, must really be thinking the disaster is going to come and they want to eat well. And that means that these folks who have these sort of like storage closet houses, they're living as though every day means a decent chance that everything's going to fall apart. You'd have to maybe assume there's some sense of not relaxing, and they're tense and sort of waiting for the sky to fall. It's not an easy way to live, but as a survivor of narcissistic relationships, I absolutely get it. People in narcissistic relationships, forget the hurricanes and earthquakes, you're living in a constant life of disaster prep. And this may be long or short term. In the short term, it means every day you just don't know if the narcissistic person is going to throw a tantrum, or what they'll be like when they walk into the door, or what's going to set them off. You don't know if today the nice version will show up, and then the plans that they want end up falling through and they implode. You may think a nice day will unfold, but then something happens where their entitlement is pinged and then boom, they blow up. When we think about short-term daily preparation for the bad thing to happen in a narcissistic relationship, or even in life, think about it in life, forget the relationship. In life, we lock our doors, we turn on alarms, you make do with what you have for dinner. You adapt, right? And you make yourself safe in whatever way that feels right to you. In a narcissistic relationship, to create that sense of safety, that may mean trying to fix the problem. And until you learned about narcissism, you may even have tried to help the narcissistic person feel better when they were throwing a tantrum. It's all good, it'll be okay. Maybe you would reassure them, and that would sometimes enrage them further. But that's just the short term. What about in the long term? Because disaster prep, when we think about it, is the doing part. Putting the food in the box or in the closet or in the basement. In some ways, that's the easy part. And frankly, I don't think there's any equivalent to that for the narcissistic relationship other than maybe saving up money for therapy or money to move out, cultivate friendships, create an exit plan. But I recognize that even that may be beyond the reach of many people. This isn't the same thing as stocking up toilet paper. But disaster prep is also the feeling part, and that's the difficult part. When folks are preparing for earthquakes and hurricanes, it's still an unknown if that thing is going to strike, right? And in your lifetime, you may be preparing for an event that may not happen or may not be that bad. Like, who knows if the big one is ever going to hit California, right? While I'm alive. And while some people live in a chronic state of tension, especially those of you who live in hurricane-prone places, or even those of us who live in earthquake-prone places, by and large, we adjust. And if we can't adjust, I guess we move. But in a narcissistic relationship, that feeling part of the disaster prep, as it were, is everything. Because your relationship is really about going from an interpersonal explosion to validation, to sunshine, to more invalidation, to gaslighting, to manipulation, to a nice day. So you never really relax. Every conversation is taut and tense, just waiting for that one thing you're going to say that will spin it all away. And keeping with the disaster theme, it would be like if you thought that saying something that would piss the earth off could set it off and then it would start quaking. Now, many folks in narcissistic relationships who cannot leave the relationships learn to make the most of the decent moments. They may learn the times of day that they can get things done. Perhaps they wake up ahead of the narcissistic person or stay up later to get stuff done. They learn that morning might be the time when they're mentally sharper, or before the narcissistic person has started their rage episodes. So you get things done before the gaslighting wears you down, right? You are always living in a state of rushing, getting stuff done before the next wave of rain or storm or shaking earth or invasion comes. Instead of calmly going through your day at a reasonable pace. When you're in a narcissistic relationship, you may find that your movements are always abrupt, quickly trying to get things done, putting out fires, getting the kids out the door to school with minimal mishaps so as to not set off the narcissistic person, or just taking a breath at the beginning of a holiday meal and trying to eat something so you can get a little food in your stomach before the various narcissistic folks at the table start engaging in their passive or overly aggressive jags. To be in a narcissistic relationship is to forever live in survival mode, living on edge, eating, resting, and working in sort of almost this survivalist manner, instead of in a well-paced way. You know, listen, for giggles here, I'll listen to, sometimes I'll actually, believe it or not, go online and listen to lifestyle and wellness folks from time to time to see what they got to say. They always kind of speak kind of slowly and softly and deliberately, like this. Today, we're going to help you create a morning routine that will help you create a sense of peace within you and allow your intention to shine. Meanwhile, someone with a nervous system like mine is jumping out of my skin, snapping my fingers, thinking, hop to it, talk faster. I often turn it to 2 times speed. I can't waste time with this. I don't know when the next problem is coming. And I say that, and it's actually, I don't live in a situation where I'm dealing with narcissistic people on the daily, but it's still in there. And for survivors who may just keep getting that message of, you need to take things slower, that may work when everything around you is safe and calm and seemingly within control. But when things are falling apart and burning down, and they're always falling apart and burning down in these relationships, you aren't breathing and thinking of intentions. If it's really a disaster, you're grabbing the pets and running, and you're always living in that state of activation. Narcissistic relationships slide into your nervous system. So even when the relationship is gone, there is still this on edge, waiting for the disaster to come, survivalist way of going through the world. People in or affected by these relationships are forever in a sense of what can go wrong, and you may never peaceably go through life. But you may forever feel you're on your back foot, rushing through the calms and the storm to be ready for the storm. And that's a great strategy for getting through a hurricane, but it's not a sustainable way to get through life. And yet, that's the legacy for many survivors of these kinds of relationships. And trauma bonding can mean that we still care too much about what the narcissistic person thinks or how they're doing or what other people think. And it's really difficult to break through these cycles. We hold these relationships viscerally, and as a result are on alert to either hide or get out or not make things worse. There's certainly no calmness in that. If only there was the equivalent of cans of beans and jugs of water for preparing for the down days of the narcissistic relationship. Many survivors sometimes wish they could be less frantic all the time, less reactive when things go wrong, calmer all the time. But it's hard to achieve that when you're always waiting for the next explosion. When you feel, in essence, like you have to be ready to scurry or retreat. Sometimes the best we can do is to be kinder to ourselves. Ideally, maybe not turn to content that's based on a world that's free of threats and is within your control. It takes time to shift how we think, for our emotions to settle, and for our bodies to heal. And that survival closet is a lot more complex to stock when that's the way you have to live. So at a minimum, just be nicer to yourself and recognize that if you are still showing up in life, despite that running script of how you aren't enough and that there is something wrong with you, then frankly, you're doing great. And it's really, this video came to a finer point for me. I was packing a suitcase this morning, and I had to pack a small suitcase because I don't want to check a bag because of the nature of the travel I'm doing. And I often struggle with doing that. I look at people who pack light, and I'm always sort of astonished by them. And I'm thinking, some of the things I wanted to bring, it really was like I was preparing for a siege, like all these things that could go wrong. I need this, what if this goes wrong? 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 And I caught myself thinking about this video that I would be making, and I thought, here we go. I was always preparing for the sort of the other shoe falling. I was always preparing for things to go wrong, which always meant I had a crowded suitcase. And so I thought to myself, if it did go wrong, then you might end up wearing the same shirt for a few days. If it did go wrong, you'll wash the underwear in the sink. If it does go wrong, you'll find a store to buy this thing in. You'll borrow it, you'll figure it out. But that fear that if you're not fully prepared, and that sort of sky is falling feeling, that is always in the narcissistic relationship, especially if this has been going on for a lot of your lifetime, it's very hard to break. So I listened to my own video, and let me tell you, I got that carry-on bag packed with room to spare, and you can too. Thanks again.